attendees of the Women's Convention at the Cobo Center in Detroit on Friday. Laura McDermott for The New York Times, Detroit. Nearly everyone here had a story about where they were in January, the day after President Trump was inaugurated. Some packed into the streets of Washington, in a defiant demonstration against the new leadership and what it would mean for women. Others recalled marching beside grandmothers and daughters in Los Angeles, New York, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Wichita, Cannes, and elsewhere. 9 months after the Women's March, 4,000 people, mostly women, gathered in Detroit this weekend for the Women's Convention, which organizers said was an extension, and also a test, of the movement that grew out of that march and others. In the halls of this convention, which at times had the mood of a raucous campaign rally, women were tackling a broad and sprawling list of issues, including Republican efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act, threats to the environment, mass incarceration, reproductive rights, workplace rules, the accessibility of child care, treatment of immigrants, protections for transgender people and more. But with UAL harassment and assault, from Hollywood to state legislatures, a focus of national discussion, those issues emerged again and again in meeting rooms here. Women shared personal stories and urged one another to speak out, and they booed mentions of Betsy DeVos, the education secretary, who rescinded Obama-era guidelines on campus UAL assault. Describing the issue as the gorilla in the room, Representative Brenda Lawrence, Democrat of Michigan, told the cheering, standing crowd on Friday night, "What you're is an awakening of women, an awakening that says we will not tolerate UAL harassment." Yet for all the disparate topics at this meeting, one thread ran through them all: opposition to the Trump administration and a pointed focus on elections next year. In small rooms, speakers led detailed training sessions for candidates at all levels: how to get the vote out, how to give a campaign speech, how to register voters, how to run for office. No one knows how many women will ultimately seek elected office next year, but the leaders of Emily's List, a national organization dedicated to advancing Democratic women in politics, said that since the day Mr. Trump was elected, more than 20,000 women have contacted the group to say they want to run for office. By comparison, the group had heard from only 920 such women in the 2 years before the election, and that number had been a record high for Emily's List. Melanie Withoff, Center of St. Paul, Min, cheered as Senator Amy Klobuchar spoke at the convention. Laura McDermott for The New York Times: the goal here is for people to go back to their local communities and prepare for 2018 and to build power, register voters, engage more people, organize on a very hyper level, said Linda Sarsauer, an organizer of the Women's March and of this convention, which leaders here view as the first of its kind since women met in Houston in 1977. "We're excited to see what happens in 2018, somewhat murkier, though, was precisely what would mark success for the 2018 elections and for this meeting." Some here said the essential goal was seeing Democrats win control of Congress. Others said a main aim was that women turn out to vote in far larger numbers, or that women win local and state races in unprecedented numbers, building a deep bench of future candidates for national slots. "What I know is this: it will be tough to wake up the day after the 2018 election if we don't have a good showing, maybe even harder than it was to wake up the day after the 2016 election," said Alana Boyle, 21, a student from New York City who rode nearly 12 hours with 7 others to attend the Detroit convention. "We are doing so many small acts of resistance, and it'd be hard if there aren't the results." The convention, held in the vast downtown Cobo Center, entitled "Reclaiming Our Time," a play on remarks by Representative Maxine Waters, the Democrat of California, at a House committee meeting, drew a wide range of women, old and young, and of different races, ethnicities, religious backgrounds and hometowns. Some people paid $295 to attend the conference, though many said they had been granted scholarships to come. Some men also attended, although Senator Bernie Sanders, who had been expected to speak, did not. Before the weekend began, critics complained that Mr. Sanders, an independent from Vermont, ought not to be offered a high-profile speaking slot, given that it was a convention for and about women. Ultimately, Mr. Sanders announced that he would instead spend the weekend in Puerto Rico, which is still reeling from Hurricane Maria. Ms. Sarsauer, one of the organizers, said the convention had no regrets for having invited him. "We think he's been a champion of women," she said. "We are a women-led movement. We are the ones who set the strategy, but we believe men are part of the fight. The convention came to Detroit, leaders said, because the region had suffered many of the problems people were facing around the country: economic struggles, questions about police conduct, and race relations. A crisis in nearby Flint over a poisoned water supply. After the Women's March in Washington and demonstrations around the country, some had questioned whether the efforts could keep up steam, particularly given the wide range of issues being addressed. In the months since the marches, smaller groups, known as huddles, have met around the country. Organizers said more than 5,000 such meetings had occurred, and pointed to the turnout at the weekend convention as more evidence that a sustained movement had emerged. One of the things I was concerned about early on was maybe we'd get numb to this environment we're in, and we haven't at all, said Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat running for governor of Michigan, who spoke at a January march in Lansing, Michigan. This is not just a one-weekend event. This is about giving people tools to stay active and to grow our grassroots effort. A version of this article appears in print on October 29, 2017, on page A23 of the New York edition with the headline "At Women's Convention, Sustaining Momentum with Focus on Elections."